All right, economic efficiency. Basically, economic efficiency, if we're going to define it, it would be producing the same level of output, so producing the same level of good using as few resources as possible, so using as few resources as possible. So for example, economic efficiency, if you have a computer company, for example, they're producing computers, they would want to produce the computer at the cheapest cost possible to get their computer. Governments have to focus on this too when getting goods to people. Efficiency just means you want to get most of the people possible with spending as little as possible. So there's like a government social program, let's say something like food stamps. You want to get the most money that's going to serve the people the best while spending the absolute least amount of money. Head Start, a pre-kindergarten program, wants to educate kids the best way it can before school while spending the least amount of money. This is what economic efficiency means. To be efficient means you don't waste. So if we look at these three scenarios here, you'll see you have three different scenarios. We'll see this is a big computer company. And capital pretty much means like things that you buy for the factory. So capital unit could be like technology used to make the computers, the warehouse, etc. All those things for capital unit. Labor unit would be basically labor, the person. Maybe you're paying the average person $50 a day to work in this factory. So this would be like capital unit per day, labor unit per day, how much it would cost. And here we have three scenarios with capital and labor, and I just want you to take a moment. If you want to hit pause for a while in this lecture, you can. Take a moment right now and look at these and think which one is the most efficient. Which one is going to give you the computer for the cheapest cost? So you're going to pause right now. All right, so if you hit pause, we're back. And if we look here, we have capital for scenario number one. There is 4 capital units, which would be $100 a piece. So the capital, the buildings, the infrastructure would cost $400. Labor, 8, that would be $400. So case 1 would be a $800 cost for the computer. Now if we go to scenario 2, this would be you hire another worker, and you have that instead of maybe having a little bit less technology there. And if we look at this one, the capital cost here would be $300, but the labor cost would be that would be $450. This would come to a total of $750. So case scenario 2 would be cheaper for this company to hire one more person and have a little bit less technology. And case 3, as you can see, obviously is more expensive because you have more labor. And here we see some diminishing returns. They're just not getting as much done here because you have $550 in labor and $300 in capital, which is $850. So the company running this would be best off to go with case 2. So economic efficiency, companies have to look at the technology they use, the amount of people they hire when they're making decisions on what to buy because they want to keep, again, profits high and then keep the incoming cost low. All right. Another value for economic systems would be economic equity. Equity deals with what is fair, what is right, and this is a very hard thing to define. What should be in an economic policy and what shouldn't be? So, how do we distribute? This is basically how do we cut the pie? How do we distribute? Now, there could be so this looks at who gains and who loses. How should taxes be dealt? Should taxes take money from people who gain a lot of money? I mean, they've presumably probably have worked hard for that. Should they be taxed? Maybe they have a skill that's valuable, but that they're able to make money. But should they be taxed higher to help people who don't have as much? So the question of economic equity is, how are people in the economic system doing? How equal are they? Is there is there an imbalance? Is there a lot of rich people and only a few rich people and a lot of poor people? So this one basically looks at balance and economic equity. It is basically how is the pie divided up. In a system like America, we like to believe that we have a free market system where if you work hard, you got skills, you can invent something, you can make a lot of money, and then you get more of the pie. And we believe that some people aren't going to get as much of the pie. And some people like to believe that it's, how hard you work is how much you get. We also know in America that's not necessarily true because if you're, born in a rough neighborhood, bad schools, you're probably not going to have the same opportunities as someone who gets a very expensive, private school education and has parents who own a company. So economic equity asks the question of how equal are things? How equal should they be? Should things be equal? Should they not be? Should people have more than others? That is a question we're going to be looking at throughout this chapter. Next would be economic security. Economic security basically deals with protection from risks. That people in the society feel that they can take some risks and they won't be punished too much, or it won't be impossible for them to get back. And a real way to look at this would be, the desire of people to be protected against economic risk which they have little or no control. Such things as accidents in the job, unemployment, poverty and old age, business failure, bank failures, price declines for one's product if you were selling something and it was very expensive and now it's cheap. So economic security is enhanced by individual efforts, such as saving and the purchase of insurance, as well as growth in the economy. Growth in the economy means more jobs. That usually means more security, more options for jobs, more pay for these jobs. Now, there's also a lot of government programs that try to do things to help with this that allow security. So if you lose your job, there's potential of unemployment compensation for a while until you get a job again. There's worker compensation if you're hurt in the job. There's Social Security for when you retire, so you'll have a pension or some money coming in, so you don't, because before we had Social Security, there were a lot of people who were retirement age, elderly people who were poor. So economic security, basically, how secure are you in that economic system? How secure is everyone in the economic system? All right, let's take a look at economic stability. And economic stability, we can definitely say there's one place in the world where we can see there's not economic stability if you watch the news. This would be Venezuela. In Venezuela, it is not a stable situation right now. There's huge inflation in Venezuela right now. The prices of goods are astronomical. They're going up. Inflation's at about 60, 70% right now, which means that if something costs $1, next year you can expect it to cost about $1.70. Prices are going up, and prices are also, and things are very rare. Like, basically, if rice comes on the market, it is very difficult to get a bag of rice. There's not much of it. And as we learned, scarcity drives up prices when things become rare. So economic stability, one way to look at it is, how constant are things in your economy? Price is one indicator. Do prices pretty much stay the same, or do they go up and do they go down? In Venezuela, prices are shooting up right now because in Venezuela, for one reason or another, there are not many products are coming in right now. So because of that, the few products they have, the prices are going up high right now. So prices there are not stable. It is not a stable place to be. Along with prices to have stability, it also means goods and services need to be readily available to people that can have them. So they have to have goods available at a price that people can afford is basically what economic stability means. And in America, often we take this for granted. We just think the goods are going to be there at Cub Foods, at McDonald's, at Aldi, at Rainbow, at any place where you can buy things. But we have a stable government. The government, the economic system here is stable. We like to see, I talked about in Venezuela having an inflation rate of 70%, which is just huge. In the United States, we get real upset if it ever gets above 5. In fact, the constant or the normal inflation rate for a healthy inflation rate is between 2 and 3%. And that's normally where we are. Now we're going to look at economic growth. Economic growth is pretty much what it looks like. How is the economy growing? How is the economy growing? So we talked earlier in economic equity about dividing the pie. Well, economic growth lets us grow the pie. So the pie actually gets bigger, so there's more of it to divide. I have two places up here, China and India. Both are seeing a lot of building. One way you could measure economic growth is how much building is going on. So if you look around, you're sitting, a lot of things are being built, a lot of things are going up. There's probably a lot of economic growth. And you could also tell by jobs. If there are more jobs for people, there's economic growth. A low unemployment rate usually signals that the economy is growing. So again, this is China, India. Both economies are growing very fast. China, I just heard on NPR yesterday, they have a goal to have an economic growth of 7.5%. So their economy is going to grow by 7.5%. Now, on comparison, if the United States next year had an economic growth rate of 7.5%, Barack Obama would probably be at 95% approval rating for his presidency. He'd be one of the most popular presidents in the last 50 years because our economy is not growing this fast. We're growing at, we would, 2% would be a really good, 2 to 3% would be good for us for economic growth. So economic growth again means how our jobs going, increasing the pie. Now, we measure this by something called gross domestic product, or GDP. All gross domestic product really is gross means total, domestic means in your country, product is how much do you produce. So, how much does your country produce? And that's one way of taking it, is how much does it produce. That's called GDP. Now, the real way to measure it is called per capita GDP. And per capita GDP, take everything a country produces and divide it by the population. So take everything a country produces, divide it by the population that lives there, and that's your per capita or per person gross domestic product. Now, if we do it by per capita, the U.S. is well ahead of China. However, China has right now the second highest total GDP of any country. But the U.S. is ahead because the average person produces more in America. However, China's is growing at a very fast rate right now. All right, so what is an economic system? What is an economic system? Well, think of it this way. No person, no man, no woman is an island. We need each other. You see, we got the ants there. We work together. We don't survive on our own. Your book gave the example of Robinson Crusoe, who was a person who was shipwrecked, made his own one-person economy, and it worked for living. More recently, about 15 years ago, there was a movie called Castaway, where Tom Hanks in that movie was on his own. Now, they made it, and they could live, but the one thing they needed was people. They needed people. People need people. We need to talk to each other. That's why we pretty much go nuts. Like it or not, we're social creatures, and we are interconnected. We're interconnected, and we work better when we work together. It's definitely what most economists believe. This is why economists aren't too crazy about borders. We're not too crazy about trade barriers. We think we need to be more interconnected. Most economists would pretty much believe the more interconnected we are, the better off we all are. And pretty much, we're stuck with each other. We got to work together, and we use our talents to make the economic system better. So an economic system, what is it? An economic system pretty much is a group of people living together, deciding how are they going to distribute the goods and services that they have. And we're going to start off with our first one, which is traditional economies. These have been the most dominant in human history. Traditional economies is pretty much how we all started. Now, write this down. I'm going to go in the next lecture and talk about it a few more. Most of human history we've as a people have had traditional economies. However, they're very rare today, and we're going to explain how that works a little more in our next lecture.